Okay, so today's project is my mom's 2003 Subaru Legacy L that needs a clutch and a flywheel. And it's right here we have the pressure plate, throw-out bearing, clutch, and the tool to install it, and that other bearing, and the flywheel, and the bearing for that, which I think that actually is the same bearing because they come separate. So, and you need an engine hoist, and we're gonna change the coolant and the rear main seal also at the same time because it's inside the bell housing, and you might as well change it while you have it out. It's one of the most common things to leak on a car. Okay, so I'm gonna go pop the hood. Okay, so first thing is to take off the hood, which is these two 12mm and these two 12mm, and then just lift it up. And it's a good idea to I've seen people put a pillow like up here so you don't hurt your windshield if it tilts back. And yeah, just be careful around the windshield. And then we'll be taking the battery out next. Okay, so we got the hood off, and don't forget this line right here is for your windshield washer fluid. It pops off right on the inside of the thermal liner or whatever for the hood. You just set that to the side, and there's a bracket that holds the battery in normally. It hooks on here, and it's two 10mm bolts on top, one here and one here, and then two, these are 10mm for the battery terminals. And yeah, so I'll get to you with the next step. So next we're taking off the air filter and tubing for it.
They're all 10 mil.
Or yeah, they're all 10mm. And you got one here, one there, and one here, and one here. And it disconnects right here. Okay, so we got the air box off, and taking this thing off, which is that bolt there, and which is 12mm. Where was the other one?
Yeah, there's just one.
No, just one 12mm. Next we're going to be taking the fan out, which means you gotta unplug the electrical connections, and then it should be this 10mm, this 10mm, this 10mm, and this one, which also holds on that, and I'm sure there's more on the bottom. And then we can drain the radiator and get the radiator out, which will clear up a lot of room. We can take the serpentine belt off after that, and yeah, we'll set the power steering pump aside, still pressurized. Same with the condenser. Or sorry, compressor, not condenser. Okay, so we got the actual air filter off now, not just the tubing. And there's the mass airflow sensor that plugs in directly into it. And then this tube right here goes on it, which is just this little thing. And on this side it was this one right here. Just same kind of thing. And you can take your air filter out if you're going to change it by just popping these off. Just pop open. So one right here, one right here, one right here, and then it opens up. Alright, so what are we doing next? Now we're finally going to get to this stuff. Okay, so to take the skid plate off, which is this plastic piece right here, you have this 12mm bolt here. There's one right here, which you can't really see, sorry, and one farther back there, and I think that's it. And then it should just pop right off. Sorry for the confusing video. Okay, so I got the skid plate off the bottom. We're going to take this up here, which is just a ground from here to here. And there's another one from there to right there. And then I'm going to take the fan off. I'm going to take the fan off, which is right here. And that one's already off, actually. This was the coolant reservoir, which was two 10mm bolts, and then it just sits in a little nipple thing in there. And yeah. Okay, so we have the antifreeze draining right there out of that hose. I just disconnected it, and I took this hose off, which runs over to here, and we got the fans out. So next, we're gonna take this shroud thing off here, this cover for the serpentine belt, 10mm, 12mm. This was a 10mm, but it's missing, and 10mm here. And then we're gonna take the radiator out. This is 12mm, and that's 12mm. And then it just sits in two nipple things. There's like one nipple thing here, and one nipple thing here, and it just kind of sits in there. And yeah, so we'll be back with that out. Look at all this shit in the radiator. Fucking gross. Big dent in the Okay, so to take your serpentine belt off right here, you want to loosen the belt, which you can see I already did, by loosening this thing, which then allows the alternator to move down. It allows this end of the alternator to go down, which then rotates it and takes tension off the belt, and then you should be able to just get it off. And it should be the same thing for this one, for the air conditioning belt, which runs to the crankshaft. So yeah, we'll have that off in a second, and we're gonna set the power steering over here with all the lines still attached, so it's not being being decompressed. Same with the compressor. It's going to be where the battery used to be, and then we'll probably take the alternator off just to get it out of the way.
Alright, so we got the AC compressor belt off. It's a little more complicated than the alternator one. Basically what you have to do is you have to loosen this pulley locker nut here. Loosen it just a little bit until it's about finger tight. And then you loosen this bolt and the bolt goes down, moving the pulley up.
It's actually right
so
hand
you can
thread.
get,
I believe this is right hand thread.
Yeah, so you can get the belt off that way. And then next, I think we're going to go for the power steering pump. It's connected by a couple bolts here, down here.
Should be 12mm.
Yeah, this should be 12. We gotta get these lines off, so there's a couple bolts here.
Yeah, there's 10mm here and 10mm here. And you should just fold over after that, because parts of these are bendable and parts are metal. So we should be able to just take the pump and set it over here.
Yep, that's the plan. Alright, so we got the power steering pump out of the way. It was just 3 bolts. One here, and one right back here, with this one electrical connection that holds it down. And then the little reservoir just kind of snaps into this little buckle thing right here. You don't even have to take it out. And then there were these 2 top bolts right here that came out of these right here. So
show the whole thing over here. So
yeah, so this is it. We just moved it off to the side. So
this is the whole power steering pump and everything, completely still pressurized. Setting it to the side, like that.
And now we're going to start on the AC pump.
We're going to do the same thing, set it where the battery is.
Yep.
Okay, so you can see right here it says 25. That's for EJ25, or the 2.2 or 2.5 liter. Sorry, and then it's got a 1 for the single overhead cam. I believe, at least, it has a 1. but it is a single overhead cam.
EJ25 right
Pretty
here.
obvious. It'd have the big other bulge here. So we got the power steering pump off, obviously. We got the alternator out. And now we're just working on this AC pump.
Yeah, we need to take these two bolts out here. So this one right here, and then this one on this side, which we can't really get all the way out, so you're just going to leave it like that. And then
you see that?
Yeah. And then these two on top right here, which are really easy.
That one.
They're all 14 mil. And then the last one is this one right here, which we thought was part of the bracket, and we weren't going to take it off, but it actually is part of the pump, not the bracket.
It's kind of confusing because it's like a half bracket, half pump that looks like a bracket.
Yeah, I'm going to take that off right now. Oh no.
Careful. Oh yeah, it's loose.
I think it was on there really tight.
Yay. My phone's gonna die.
Alright, what's that?
I gotta go plug in my phone.
Good stuff.
Alright, we'll come back. Okay, so
Just took
we're trying
these,
we have the compressor off and loose. We're just trying to get stuff out of the way before we fold it over. So I took this off, which is these two 10mm bolts, which we just put back in the holes, which bolts that onto there. And these, you don't really have to mess with them. And you just push this over like that, which should, yeah, opens your throttle. So you push that down, and then it has a pin thing that comes out the side with the wire on for each of these. So yeah, you just do that with each of those, and then they slide off.
and just move it out of the way.
And they look like that. So yeah. And just set this aside.
Yeah, we need to get it out of here.
Yeah. Don't scratch your paint.
Oh, whoops. Alright, so just real quick, you just take this brake booster line off. It's really simple, it's just a regular hose. And then down here later on, we need to take these heater core hoses off. Right down in here, there's two of them. They have a little screw bracket on them. That way we can get access to the starter and take that out later.
Starter's right there. Yeah, and we're gonna end up having to loosen this thing too.
Okay, so it's day 2. First off, we're gonna start out. We're gonna label all of these electrical connections with a little bit of masking tape, just so we know exactly where everything is gonna go. We're gonna take these fuel lines off right here. They have to. These are really important to label each one individually, so we can get them on the right hose again.
The top two are the same size,
because these two,
which are bigger, and then the bottom one is smaller.
yeah. So we get those labeled so we can get those out of the way and move the compressor.
They've been labeled before, actually.
Yeah. So we'll get this compressor out of the way, and then we can get to the starter a lot easier, and get that out of the way, and get this engine out. We got the fuel lines off. All you had to do is take off these little clamps. This one has two of them have these little screw clamps, so you just unscrew them, work them back off the hose, and then you just take pliers and slowly edge them off of the fuel rails.
So we labeled them T for top, M for middle. Those are the two screw ones.
Yeah,
and then L is lower. And that's the.
Yeah, this is the one that has a different clip. It has a really easy one. Take it off with pliers.
So now that should make it easier to fold this over. Now that we have these out of the way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then we're also going to label other stuff. One down.
Alright, so we got a lot of the electrical connections disabled, or unhooked. Got them all labeled right here.
Let's get one of the heater hoses off.
Next, I got to take these bolts off right here, so I can get this bracket off. And this actually is all one piece that holds all of these together, and also connects this O2 sensor cable right here to the actual engine. So get that out, And he's working on the heater core hoses right now.
Used to. I just
got one of them off already. And we had to take the windshield washer reservoir out. It's just these two bolts, and then it sits in the nipple, and then there's two hoses. There's a hose on the bottom that, and then there's a hose right here that feeds to the actual wipers.
They're both on the bottom, they're just on different sides.
Yeah, and then there's two electrical connections. So we just got that, set that out in the grass, so it doesn't leak all over the place. And yep, that's what we're doing next.
Some fluid if you take that off, just so you know.
Yeah. Alright, so I just noticed something when I was disconnecting this O2 sensor cable. You don't actually have to take this whole bracket out. You can just disconnect this from this little bracket with this little button on the back of it, and it just comes off of this entire bracket. So I'm just putting this right back on so I don't have to mess with it later. Stop it.
Okay, so we had to take this bracket off, which is just a bar that bolts on to the side of the transmission with one 12mm bolt, right? Two 12mm bolts.
Yeah, there's one back here on the side of the transmission.
It's what your airbox bolts do, and it's in the way of the starter. Get this bolt off the starter, which also connects to that. So once you get this off, then you can get to your starter. So here, show them where it's at.
To the front for us.
Yep.
So it's right up through here. I don't know if you can really even see it. You can't even see it. There's just two bolts. You just gotta get it from underneath. It's pretty easy.
I appreciate the hard work.
Alright, so now we're gonna get the starter out. It's really only held down by two bolts. There's one right here, and then one directly underneath it. And then there's just this ground right here, and then your electrical connection. And it really just kind of pops out.
So that comes off with, I think that's 12.
Pretty much everything on here is 12, I think.
Most things are 12.
I think, actually, the starter bolts, I think, are 14.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Okay, so we got the starter unbolted, ready to come out.
And there's one more connection in the back.
What? Is that a negative?
Yeah, it looks like a...
Some kind of plug.
It's an electrical plug. So let's get that undone.
So yeah, don't forget that electrical plug, like we just did. We'll be right back. Okay, so to get this starter bolt out, which is the bottom one, this one's actually a bolt, not just a nut on a stud. You have to get like a big ratchet, and I found that the best way is with this out, have one arm in here like this, and your other arm down like this, and somehow get it above your driveline U-joint, like to get it on that bolt and crack it loose with a big ratchet, and then switch to a tiny ratchet and just get it out like that. And so there's a positive connection, a negative connection, and also a sensor plug in the back, which is a really simple plug. It's just like, it's probably the easiest one on the harness to take out so far.
Okay, so we went over everything, double checked everything we can to make sure we have everything disconnected on top.
We still have to loosen this.
Yeah, we still have to loosen this, I think it's a tension arm. So the next step is we gotta go down underneath the car and we gotta loosen these exhaust manifold bolts, and there's really only 3 on each one. They're just right here. I think they're 14mm. Yeah. Really simple. Just each side has 3.
Make sure not to mess up the gasket.
Yeah, save your gasket and try not to mess anything up. Okay, so once you get the exhaust manifold off, it's going to be time to start taking the bell housing bolts out. But make sure you get like a piece of plywood or something to protect this condenser, because when we're actually going to be pulling the engine out, you don't want it to swing over and poke a hole in it.
You can see someone's already fucked it up right here.
Yeah, there's a little bit of damage on it already, so you just want to make sure we keep that thing as intact as possible. So we're going to use this. It's just a piece of wood. And
just so where the radiator was.
Yep, it just kind of sets in right there and protects everything.
Okay, so we got the bell housing bolts off. There's 4 on each side. There's this one goes through the starter, and then there's this one on this side that doesn't, obviously. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know. You can't. No, actually, I'm touching it right now. This stud is number 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so there's 4 on each side. 2 of them on this side go through the starter. These 2. The bolt goes in here, and then this one and that one. And the very bottom ones are studs with nuts on them, and the very top ones are studs with nuts on them. So it'll kind of, ours actually separated a little bit when we took all of them off. So we put this bolt back in for when we lift the engine up a little bit, and then we'll take the weight off it with a jack. We'll take the weight off the transmission with a jack, and then take this bolt back out to separate it. And we've also got these to lift it up by. This is on the factory hook, and this, I don't know if this is for what the factory uses, but we're gonna use it because it's strong.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, so we have the exhaust manifold off. It just comes off these studs. They're 14mm. It's three studs on each side. And on my older Subaru, one of the studs came out with it, but it worked fine going back in because the nut was like stuck on it, so it was practically a bolt. So don't worry about it if that happens. And we have the motor mounts right there. That's 14mm. And the other side of the cross member, hold on. It's
just 2.
There's just 2. I can't get a clear shot of it. I can't get a clear shot. There's like crap in the way. But it's right where I'm touching, right here. They're both 14mm, one on each side. Right underneath each end of the block. And yeah, and then so once you take those off, then you can start lifting up the engine, and then take some weight off the transmission like we said, and then take that last bolt out, and we should be able to separate it fairly easily. Okay, so we have our block of wood here. We took the nuts off of the engine mounts on each side, it's just 2. And then left 1 bolt in there, raised the engine up.
As we're raising the transmission.
As we raised the engine initially, it looked like the car was coming with it, and as a matter of fact, it did quite a bit. But what you have to do, you have to raise it a little bit, and then check those studs, and then like just grab your engine and rock it a little bit, and get the studs to kind of pop through, and then raise it a little bit, get the studs to pop through, and just kind of shake it around until your studs are all the way clear. And then you can take your jack under here, support the transmission a little bit, take some weight off it, and then take your last stud out, or take your last bolt out that you had over here, and then it begins to separate. And now, so it's clear of the vertical studs for the engine, and now we have to get it clear of the horizontal studs from the transmission, or from the engine into the transmission. But just wanted to show you guys where we're at, because we're doing like the most exciting part and not recording, so.
Okay, so we separated the engine from the transmission. As you can see, this clutch is toast. It's all chewed up.
There is not supposed to be anything like that on there.
Yeah, so all we had to do to separate it is you get like a big screwdriver or like a chisel, and pry it back and forth.
These are the 4 studs I was talking about previously.
Yeah, right here. So after this,
best thing to do to actually get those studs out, other than using like a chisel or a flathead to just kind of separate it, is just stand right here, take your 2 hands, grab both of these headers, or not headers, intake, and just fucking pull that shit. Wait, hold on, we need to make sure everything's clear.
Yeah, just take it slow, check stuff, pump it up, check stuff, make sure everything's disconnected.
And another thing is that immediately coolant started pouring out of that hose for the water pump. So just be ready to throw a pan under there. But as you can see, it's coming out. This is how we did our chain. Make sure that your chain lengths are exactly the same or as close as you can get them. And we hooked it to that with one of these from Home Depot or some shit. Same thing there.
Yeah, check back in a minute.
Yep, we'll have it out. Go. Okay, so in order to get your pressure plate off, you have this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, that bolt, that bolt, and that bolt, which are all 12mm, and this spins freely. So what a lot of people do is you just take a wrench, you put it on that stud, go onto one of them, so it'll keep it from rotating for at least all of them but that one. And then you can just find another spot for that one. And so we use a breaker bar because it's the easiest thing.
Yeah, I'll get your pressure plate out of the way.
Yeah. Alright, so this is what happens whenever your mom gets a car that's a new car and it's a stick, and she doesn't know that the clutch is bad and asks you why she's at 6,000 RPMs going up a hill. It's because she's burning the shit out of the clutch, but it's not her fault because it was slipping anyway. So, but look how goddamn bad that is. That's caked on powder from the clutch disintegrating right there. And there is literally a groove melted into the flywheel.
Look at the pressure plate.
The pressure plate's even worse. It's got a lip right here and a lip right here and burn marks all the way around. And the clutch disc itself,
not much left of it.
Yeah, it's basically gone. I mean, it's got like all this shit just burned off.
Don't ride the clutch.
Be gentle to your clutch, unless you're racing. So yeah, we'll be back with the flywheel off, which should be, these look like, what is that, 12 or 13mm?
Yeah, something like that.
Probably 13. And we'll get the flywheel off, and then we'll be doing the rear main seal too, while we have that off. So yeah, we'll be back. So we're gonna do the same thing for the flywheel, where we're just gonna put a wrench on the stud. This is actually the same bolt from the pressure plate. We just put it back in, with it going through a circle one. And that's the best way to keep it from spinning on you while you try and take these out. So these are torqued down, and they're 14mm, and they're a bitch to get out. You need a breaker bar. If you're gonna invest in any tool, invest in a breaker bar, even if it's a small one. So look at all that clutch dust on there. I don't know if you can see that, but there's plenty of this shit just caked in there. And that's your rear main seal. This one doesn't look like it was actually leaking. Actually, maybe a little bit. It seems kind of oily. But we're going to change it anyway, just because it's an easy seal. So to get your rear main seal out, you want to take a flathead and just tap it in gently like this until you get it in a decent amount, and then pry back a little bit, tap it in farther, and then pry back a little bit. Just make sure you do not scratch or harm the crankshaft where the seal rides on it, and also on the inside of here on the engine block where it rides on that. And then this is our new one, and I have fresh grease all on it, and we're just gonna tap it in this way.
Did you do all of the grease?
Yeah. It's fine. So there's a spring inside here. You can't really see. One side's flat, one side has a spring on the inside. That spring is what holds the pressure. So you need that spring facing the pressure, which is the inside of the engine. So it's going to be the flat part facing you, so you can tap it in. Don't tap it in. So this is your throwout bearing, which will be on here, on there like that, and it clips on. See this clip here, and that clip there is that clip, and this little metal clip that fell off. And you go on there just like that. Can you show that? How the clip goes on before you clip it. That's how it rests. And as you can see, this needs to be changed too. It's pretty disgusting.
One comes with it.
I mean, it still probably works, but not like it should. And just make sure this surface right here is clean for your flywheel bearing to ride on. Make sure these splines are good and clean, and make sure you wipe off this surface for your new throwout bearing. And this right over here, we had to tap in the rear main seal, and we kind of messed it up a little bit. We ended up with a couple little nicks, but hopefully it'll still work. And make sure you grease the seal before you tap it in. If you can find something that's a perfect circle shape, the right size, then that would be ideal. We had to use a punch and we messed it up.
That's what that bearing.
And this bearing, I can't touch it, but we are going to clean this with a brake cleaner before we put it in. You got to clean your clutch, or at least your flywheel, I believe, with
and the pressure plate.
And the pressure plate with brake cleaner before
tap that in
installing it in.
That thing.
This is a 25mm socket that we used that fits. It's a little bit big, but it kind of worked perfect because it didn't tap it in too far. So I don't know, whatever works best.
All you need to do is just get it flush with this right here. Once it's flush, it's ready to go in.
Yeah, it's got to have space on the other side for this piece.
That part of the crank.
So yeah, we'll be back with the clutch on.
Alright, so it's pretty easy to install this. You just lift it up, make sure these two pegs here and here are lined up where they were on the old one, which is pretty easy because there's marks on the inside of the crank. So you just kind of hold it up, put these in here finger tight, and then we're going to clean this up and torque it down to 53 foot-pounds, which is what it's rated for a 2003.
You can see it on this though.
Alright, so we got everything torqued down to 53. Now we're just using our brake cleaner and our shop rags.
Brake cleaner, blue shop rags work best, although it is getting some lint on it. I don't know if you guys know of a rag that doesn't get lint on anything, but that would be best. But you can see how much is coming off, even though you probably can't see it on there.
Yeah, they usually come with a protective coating on them. You just gotta get it clean and get all any kind of finger grease or anything off of it, so it's a nice good seal.
We got it plenty dirty beforehand. So.
Yeah, that's it. Alright, so now we got this pressure plate torqued down. So the way we have to do it is you just you put the tool in. Where's the tool at?
It's right there.
You put the tool in to hold the clutch plate.
You put the tool in the clutch first, which is right here. It's that disc.
Yeah.
You put it through the splines, and then put the end of the tool into the flywheel. It'll go into the bearing.
So this is the old one?
This is the old clutch.
Basically, you put it like this. You put the...
except it'll be at the end of the splines.
Yeah, you put the flatter side towards the engine. So this sticks out, so it goes inside of the pressure plate. You put this on, and it'll support it on its own. And then you have to put the pressure plate over it and get these in finger tight. And you have to make sure you get it in the right position, because it'll only go in one position because of these little pins right here and right here. So you get it in the right position, you put the in finger tight, and then you have to take a regular ratchet and go around the entire, go around in a star pattern.
You basically close it, because there'll be a gap.
Yeah, you just close the gap, because this thing, it's a pressure plate. So this right here is what gives it pressure. So it has like a little spring action.
It has to pinch the clutch in place with these bolts. Then you torque them down to like 11.6.
Yeah, 11.6 foot-pounds.
Then you can take the tool out once you have that done.
And then you're basically ready to put it back in the engine.
And that tool is essentially that thing. And that's your new throwout bearing. I didn't show how to put those clips back on, but they're very self-explanatory. They're also very flimsy, so be careful with yours. And we put a little grease on those splines and where the bearing's going to ride for the flywheel. So, yeah. And we also cleaned up a little bit to have it kind of nice under there. See if we get any new leaks.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that rear main seal was leaking.
Yeah.
There was oil all over the place.
It definitely was. That's probably the main thing that was leaking, actually. It was coming down
and all over the motor mounts. We cleaned it up a little bit, but it's still pretty gross.
It's making the head gaskets look like they're bad, but I don't think they actually are. I don't know. Maybe someone on YouTube probably knows better than me. We're not pretending to be Subaru experts either. We've just done this once before on my older Legacy that you can kind of see over there. And yeah, so we have a little bit of experience. I want to do this more in the future though, for sure.
Okay, so we got the engine back in. We had to raise up the transmission quite a bit with the jack. And then at the same time we lower the engine down in here and slowly move it in and get these, because these actually go all the way through, so get those to line up. And then we actually had to crank this clockwise just a little bit to get the splines that go into the transmission to line up, because that's a pretty common problem, is it won't line up with the new flywheel on. So once we got that to line up, we just closed the gap. We just edged it in a little bit at a time and then closed the gap with the bolts. So
it's kind of a complicated process to get.
Yeah, it takes a lot of patience
in and lined up to the transmission, and also so you have studs coming this way like that, and then you have two studs like this, and you have to get the engine onto these studs with the transmission lifted up, and then like drop it down and use the transmission bolts to tighten it together. Actually, before you drop it, I think, if that works best for you. It's really just what works best. Like it's you'll understand.
What we're gonna have to do is actually go down and get underneath the car and loosen the mounting brackets.
Yeah, it helps.
And once we loosen the mounting brackets, we can get them through the subframe holes and bolt it down and retighten
the part
them.
that has the stud on it. So you can loosen the bracket that has the stud on it to get it to line up with the frame, and then drop the engine in, and then kind of like bolt it down afterwards.
All right, so we're going to work on the mounting bolts and come back in a minute. All right, so the engine's back in. We ended up having to loosen only one of the mounting bolts, and then the mounting bracket, sorry, and then kind of slowly lower the engine and move and shove it side to side, and then lower the transmission jack and kind of slowly work it in and just kind of see what works.
You gotta have one person under here. You gotta be down here.
You gotta have one person underneath.
And wear safety glasses and use gloves.
Yeah. And so now basically it's just torquing everything up. The bell housing bolts have to be torqued to 36 foot-pounds. I think it's right. That's what I got written down. And it's just reassembly. So.
Sorry for like probably the worst video of how to change a clutch of all time.
But it works. Alright, well, basically everything we gotta do now is the same thing, is, just in reverse. So, we got our compressor already hooked back up. It's just 4 bolts. So
we bolted back to here. We had unhooked
it's just pretty much the same exact thing in reverse. So we will film it when we get it started. And
don't forget your sensors.
Yep, all the electrical connections, and just triple check everything. That's the biggest thing. So. All right, turn it off. All right, so that's the new clutch on the 2003 Subaru Legacy. Just make sure you triple check absolutely everything. Make sure every single plug is plugged in, every bolt is tight.
If you're going to do spark plugs with the engine out, make sure you remember to do that, because we forgot. And it's really hard to get to if you forget. So
They don't really need to be replaced, but
yeah, they're fine.
It's fine. So yeah, that's about it.
Don't forget to get all your air bubbles out of your radiator.
Oh yeah, you gotta bleed your radiator every once in a while.
Like you just gotta like run it after you fill it up, and then turn it off and check the level. Obviously, once it's cool, and it'll have dropped a little bit because it has air bubbles in it. So you just fill it up. You can use water.
Yep.
Doesn't hurt.
There she is. All right, thanks for watching.